I want to say a few words to introduce myself to those who have recently subscribed and those who don't know me. I'm just an ordinary guy, Mississippi, 55. I've worked most of my life in construction-related trades. Most of that time, I was self-employed. Not a very good businessman, but somewhat of a craftsman. Well, I am a craftsman, but I'm definitely not a good businessman. And I don't get along well with the public because I'm introverted. Everything spooks me. I'm spooked very easily. I worry a lot. So, this makeup, this psychological makeup I have, makes me an artist or a musician or a craftsman, but not a businessman. And so from time to time, I've been lucky to find a job, usually in with a small business, where the boss is unusually agreeable and tolerant, and he can put up with my eccentricities, at least for a while. Both my parents were pretty bright and were self-educated. My father was mainly involved in the Navy and the Merchant Marine. Both my parents came from the Birmingham, Alabama area, and they lived in South Mississippi before I was born. In the 1950s, Dad got back in the Navy to serve his country in the Korean conflict. And that's how I happened to be born in San Diego, California. That's a Navy town, or Anaheim. Didn't stay there but a few months, so I don't remember it as a child, but I visited a couple of times over the years. And I'm glad that I live in Mississippi and not the Los Angeles area. California didn't impress me because of the highways are too massive, the crowds are too massive, it's a little too dry for me. I like the woods of southern Mississippi the best. I like things green. Even though the humidity is high and we have mosquitoes, our winters are very mild. Okay, so I went to school on the Gulf Coast and briefly was institutionalized in 3 institutions of higher learning without getting a degree. I escaped from the institution in 1979 and struck out in the real world, literally. And so now I have a smattering of book learning and a little bit of experience. I used to consider myself a moderate politically, or somewhat leaning to the right, but now the whole world has shifted drastically to the left, so that puts me right in the middle of the right-wingers. I don't like socialism. I admit that capitalism has an ugly side. It's based on greed, self-interest. But guess what? Socialism is based on greed and self-interest. The difference between the two is that capitalism actually produces wealth and socialism only redistributes the wealth that was not created. Thus, the wealth dwindles down to nothing. I want to remember and touch on the concept of the connections, the neural connections inside the brain, so that we can override impulse, and how that this connection can be developed. And I know that this connection can evolve and become stronger, so that humanity becomes free from enslavement to the reptile brain. Never completely free. We need it. It's not free, but a partnership.
can develop. The two parts of the brain, the cortex and the stem, the outside and the inside, the higher brain and the lower brain, working together for the betterment of the individual and of society. Thus, taking a step toward world peace, which is my ultimate goal, not to overthrow Obama or to join some group or cult or movement like a mindless zombie and have them tell me what to think and what to do.
You may have gotten the impression by what you read at the beginning about Khrushchev that it was the U-2 spy plane incident that caused an escalation in the Cold War. This is not true. That implies that the United States was to blame, that if only we had not been spying on the Russians, everything would have been just dandy. That's not true. How did the Russians shoot down the spy plane? Pacepa believes that Oswald was recruited by the Soviet Union. When Oswald was a Marine stationed in Japan, where he had privileged information, details about the U-2 spy plane, including the altitude at which it flew, which was above the radar at the time used by the Soviets. It was out of sight to the Soviets. So it was incapable of really being targeted. Yet the Soviets, according to Pacepa, had targeted Oswald, recruited Oswald, brainwashed Oswald, extracted the information from him, which enabled them to shoot down the U-2 spy plane. Obviously, the Russians knew it was there. Obviously, the Russians wanted to shoot it down. It wasn't Eisenhower's use of the spy plane that caused an escalation in the Cold War. The point is, the Soviets were successful in shooting down the U-2 spy plane, which they knew was there all along. And then later, Oswald was involved in a rather notable assassination. The communist revolutions that were inspired in Africa by the Soviets and the Red Chinese and the Cubans, that never happened. It never happened. The only thing happening in Africa is like good things. Everything is good in Africa. There is no worldwide communist conspiracy. They have not infiltrated the U.S. Congress, for example. They have not infiltrated the White House, for example. They have not infiltrated the media and the educational system. They have not taken over the banks and General Motors. They have not created socialized medicine anywhere. Anywhere. Not in Canada, not in Europe, Britain, the United States, and they don't intend to. There's no such thing as communism. There's only liberals, and they love humanity.